So yesterday I put out a video where I gave some preliminary thoughts on the issue of online regulation as well as potential mass surveillance or censorship. The video was very unfocused. I didn't give a lot of context for the things I was speaking about. In particular, I did not explain the fact that that video was a thought experiment. It was not actually meant to be indicative of everything that I think or even what I think. The video was just kind of a collection of things that happened to have been stirring around in my head after I read an article that made me very emotional about a satanic cult that led to a Hawaiian man getting indicted. You can read about it online. Um, I had been very emotional about that, and it led me to thinking about the broader issue of child safety on the internet. And it led me down a path that was more on the side of government regulation. However, I very poorly explained what this would entail, at least from my own point of view, in that video. Because in the video, I seem to have given these vague overtures towards the idea of expanding the state's spying powers, or perhaps requiring ID to use the internet or for certain services. And while I think those are interesting ideas, they can be explored, and I will explore them, in fact, in this video. Uh, those ideas don't really encompass what I'm in favor of or what I believe. And the reason for that is primarily because I don't really know what I'm in favor of in regards to this topic. I know that about a year ago, I started to move in a different direction from the one I had historically been in, which was on the side of no government whatsoever, uh, no regulation whatsoever, make the state as small as possible. The government that works the best is the one that works least, yada yada. I was on that team. I had that point of view. And about a year ago, something started to change where I saw what a lot of these younger folks were supposedly doing on TikTok, and much of that was exposed to me by my younger sister, and I just had the sense that something is going awry in the population. And there's some trends here that need to be undone. That there's some unhealthy habits that are rapidly spreading across the youth, namely with the promotion of stuff like anorexia content, but also even more insidiously, the prevalence of grooming on platforms like Discord and Instagram. And so this bothered me a lot to see, and it made it evident to me that this was a bigger issue than I had previously thought it to be. I was in kind of a position of privilege almost in my ignorance of the issue, in my ignorance of how pervasive the issue was. Because in that place of ignorance, I could feel comfortable in saying, sure, sometimes bad things happen, but overall, what's going on is okay. You see just how pervasive these things are, and you realize that it's not okay. And it makes you start to consider things like regulation, things like the government stepping in and perhaps creating incentives for parents to monitor their kids more vociferously, perhaps creating incentives for kids to not use the internet altogether. I explored one example of what that might look like, which is a financial incentive. Um, you know, Perhaps we could change the infrastructure to make things like biking more accessible for families of all incomes. And in fact, on the route, make it to where there's something like a gymnasium where kids and families can exercise together, and those kids and families actually receive financial benefits for doing so, tax incentives, perhaps direct cash payments. These could be ways that we're getting kids off of the computer, off of the phone. There could be a law in place that requires all education, all educators, to explain the dangers of the internet and how to stay safe on the internet. There are many different ways that this could be tackled, but every single thing that I just described involves expanding the size of government in order to ensure the safety of the population. And that is the crux of what I believe in, of where my opinion has changed from the complete laissez-faire libertarian fantasy that I had previously been believing in, one that I personally believe neglects the broader issue at stake, which is the health of young people and also of society as a whole, because eventually those people will grow up. And I don't claim to have the solutions. I don't claim to know what we ought to do here, but there are different ways we could go at it. I think inevitably what we're going to need to do is some kind of regulation to ensure that this kind of behavior is discouraged or disincentivized or unlawful, whatever that may be. And this kind of behavior being, the unhealthy habits of the minors and the illegal behavior of some of the adults who may end up contacting said minors. Now, with all of that being said, I think the video that I made did a poor job at articulating this as my position, because I hadn't made it clear that I was engaging in a thought experiment. I've since changed the title to clarify that. The clickbait title that I had put out there made it seem like I was in favor of something much more wide-reaching than I am. And I don't want that video to give that impression, because there are people who watch me who find the things that I say to be very convincing, even though I'm just a fairly normal dumbass with a camera in front of them. They find the things that I have to say convincing. Maybe they just like me. And I don't want to necessarily change their opinion to something I myself don't even agree with. It's important to recognize that not just in that video, but in a lot of these videos, I'm doing a thought experiment without explicitly stating that I'm doing a thought experiment, because I never intended for these videos to be taken as seriously as they are by some people. I never intended for these videos to get as much attention as they sometimes do. In my mind, my channel still has 100 subscribers. And sometimes my videos only have, 200, 300 views? There are times when you get thousands of people looking at something you did and responding in very pointed and detail-oriented ways, and it just surprises you. You didn't expect to get that kind of response just because you posted something online. But it's the internet. Everyone can use it, and the things that you say have consequences and warrant responses. And so I don't think it's unreasonable that I received a lot of the criticism that I did on that video. What disappoints me, at least in regards to my own conduct, is that it was not made clear that that video was intended to explore different concepts, that I was not married to, that I had no real stake in, but I found to be compelling given these broader problems that I'm sure disturb all of us. These problems that all of us feel are worthwhile in looking at and trying to find solutions to. My own wife in the video provided several criticisms to the perspective that I was putting out there, even going as far as suggesting that my policies, or my purported policies, could do damage to children who were in disadvantaged situations like the ones that I was ostensibly seeking to prevent. And so she didn't hold a lot of punches against the things that I was saying, and rightfully so. I think that kind of discussion needs to be had. But that was the point of the video. Like, the point of the video was to get people to have the discussion. It was not to say, this is exactly what I think. This is the most fleshed out version of what I think. Let's all have at it. It was to have the kind of discussions that people in the comments ended up having. But the abrasive way that I attempted to get that discussion going ended up, I think, leading people to misconstrue some of the statements that I made. It led to people thinking that some of the statements I made were indicative of my ideology or exactly what I think. And they're not. And the simple reason for why they are not is because I don't really have a stance. Like, the only stance that I have is this vague idea that I think the government should do something. And the thing is, something could be a whole lot of things. Like, something could be increased education and schooling, it could be tax incentives, it could be cash payments, it could be something as wide-reaching as IDs for certain services or all services, it could be the outright banning of smartphones. I would love to see that, but that's never going to happen, so I'm not going to advocate for it. It could be all kinds of things. I don't know. I literally don't know. I'm just a guy, and I'm not going to pretend like I know more about this than I do. Even if I knew a reasonable amount about this subject, I wouldn't pretend that I know more about it than I do. And so, hopefully that quiets some of the confusion surrounding that video and others like it. There's other examples of videos exactly like that one. I think another one just to mention would be the How to Stop School Shootings video, which for some reason has recently received a bit of attention. That video was a thought experiment as well. Like, the things in that video were not meant to be taken. I'm going to take a sip of this Nestea for a moment. The things in that video were not meant to be taken as a 100% literal representation of all of my beliefs about that issue, or even some of my beliefs about that issue. It was just meant to be interesting. It was meant to be somewhat comedic and kind of shitposty, but to maybe get the juices flowing on the viewers' minds, or in the viewers' minds, to think about the issue. And I thought I was presenting some, to put it lightly, different solutions for a big and very serious problem. So it's not like this is the first time that I've done this. I've taken serious issues before and then somewhat crassly talked about solutions that I'm not actually in favor of, but I talked about them with the intention of getting other people to think about those issues and to hopefully argue against the strange things that I had to say. So that was the point of that video, and in one sense it succeeded in its goal, but in another sense it failed because I was associated in way too direct of a way with the things that I said, when in reality those things were not meant to be indicative of my broader opinions, of my general opinions. The fact is, I don't really have much in the way of opinions on this issue, other than something needs to be done about it, and what's happening currently is bad.